Hey guys, it's Karaoke, and in this video we're going to go over positioning based on the line of scrimmage. This is going to help with team fights, laning, and basically everything that's to do with League. It's really how to position in general in League of Legends. Before we begin, I'd like to do a little bit of a highlight of some of the comments on the last video. I really appreciate your guys' support. So much so that on this video, if you leave a comment and we reach, let's just say like 10 likes, I'll give out either a free 30-minute session with myself or a free course of your choosing. So what is the line of scrimmage? In traditional football, the line of scrimmage is a imaginary line between both teams, and that holds true in League in some scenarios. The main difference in League is that the line there is really based on your perceived threat of your opponents. So while in lane, where there's one player on one side and one player on the other side, or if you're grouping when there's 5 people on near your tower and 5 near their tower, the line of scrimmage might be, just perfectly in between both teams. However, in a skirmish or a team fight, a line of scrimmage can be bent, it can be distorted, there can even be more than one line of scrimmage, so it gets more complicated in actual team fights. Now, while threat is the indicator of where the line of scrimmage is, that's not necessarily where you should be positioning around the line of scrimmage. It's really just the first step. You have to know where that line of scrimmage is so that you can use your champion's archetype and your opponent's archetypes to really realize where you need to be in that fight. So what are archetypes? It's really just a way of identifying what champions are capable of in the game, either because of their kit or because of what items and runes they take. Those are very big factors as well. You can really change the way a champion is played based on the runes and items you build on them. I have a course on this topic on my website. It's absolutely free, and I will leave a link in the description for you to go check it out. Oh, and I should mention that while the line of scrimmage is definitely determined by the threat, there is also the opposite of threat, which is safety. So your safety, which is sometimes your tower, sometimes your teammates, that's also going to be an important factor for really identifying where the line of scrimmage is. And you'll be able to see that in the examples we're going to go over right now. Alright, so before we go into in-game examples, I'm going to use Rift Kit and just move things around so that you can follow along and get to see the line of scrimmage move in a theoretical sense so that I can give you simpler examples, because in-game sometimes it can be pretty complicated. So here, if you don't already know, T stands for top, middle, jungle, AD, support. And we're going to assume these are the archetypes of the champion, so a very super standard team composition for both teams. And the line of scrimmage in lanes, as I alluded to earlier, is very simple in this state, right? The line of scrimmage is just really right between both teams, because there's really nothing that complicated happening, right? So as we zoom in here, if this mid player were to run this direction, for the opponent mid, the line of scrimmage would have kind of changed a little bit, because the area of threat would have changed, right? So if you were to go to the left here, the line of scrimmage would change like this. And so it could be a balancing act in lane to know where your line of scrimmage is. I think the most applicable use of this is normally when you're trying to push your opponent laner into your teammate so they can get gains, right? So if we assume that the red team's jungler is over there, this laner might want to move the line of scrimmage so that the line of scrimmage now becomes this, and their opponent wants to position here. And that's because backline champions normally want to position perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, because that's normally the safest area to be in, because it's the farthest area from the threat, because the line of scrimmage is based on the threat. So if you're a backline champion, you normally want to be very far away from the threat, right? Or at least far away that you can still be useful. So the red player might trick the blue player here into being positioned towards the gank, right? Now, that example assumes that the blue player doesn't know that the enemy jungler is here. And very often, early game, the jungler is much more threat than the laner. The only time that's not true is if it's a very aggressive laner, or if the laner is the one that has the CC, while the jungler does not. So let's assume that the blue mid laner here actually knew that the red team jungler was here. Well, then this is really the line of scrimmage. We're going to assume that the jungler has the threat. So the line of scrimmage is really in twofold. You could bend it, but it really depends on like how weird the line of scrimmage is. But normally I like to see this in a twofold kind of position, where the larger threat is a more important line of scrimmage. So even though this positioning might be closer to his opponent, it is farther away from the larger point of threat. Also, as I talked about earlier, the distance to safety here, or this is the safety in lane. That's very, very normal in lane for your tower. I mean, it's very normal just generally in game for your tower to be your safety, although sometimes it is your teammate. You want to position closer to your safety. So the line of scrimmage is being both influenced by the jungler being here, the mid laner being here, but also for your safety being here, right? So let's use one scenario that I think often happens, and it's a pretty common mistake when I am reviewing players, is let's assume blue team didn't know that this guy was going to gank, and this guy comes out the gank, and let's say it's, I don't know, like Jarvan, right? Something threatening early game, or let's say Pantheon, so it's just point and click, and Jarvan starts, or Pantheon starts running at our laner, and let's say, I don't know, like Xerath starts walking up. The blue mid laner oftentimes wants to run towards their distance, their safety, which is over here, right? However, normally when you're doing this, you're kind of ignoring the line of scrimmage. So again, in this scenario, there's basically two line of scrimmages, or yeah. And by running in this direction, you're allowing this line of scrimmage to collide into you, right? Because you're not going away from it. Now you are running away from one line of scrimmage, your opponent laner, but if this is the smaller point of threat, like we use in our previous example, then the one that you really need to care about is running away from the jungler in this situation. So while this tower is generally considered your safety, in this situation, most of the time the correct answer is to run away from that point of threat because it's the bigger, it's the bigger threat, right? And you run in this direction, and you consider your safety of the river, right? Also, in this specific example, you can do better kind of flashes over walls to save you, and sometimes your jungler will be on this side, but to not get too complicated, the main thing here is that you have to realize it's not just about going to your safety, it's about avoiding the threat. Back when I used to coach challenger teams, I actually used to play Malphite and then have my other players on the enemy team, and I'd run at them at different points on the map, and they would have to stay in a correct positioning based on the line of scrimmage, based on where I was, right? And so, like for example, I would have them group up middle, and then I might run at them from an angle. I might push them in this direction, and the line of scrimmage gets harder, or positioning gets harder. The line of scrimmage doesn't really get harder whenever you're in these chokeholds in the jungle, right? Because you don't exactly have the most room to really figure out where you're supposed to be positioned. It can get very jumbled up really quickly. But if I keep pushing them, then now they have an open area. But now if I keep pushing them, they might get split up, and they have to decide. So it used to be a very common drill when I was coaching challenger teams. All right, so let's go over an in-game example. This video is of me multiple years ago playing AD. I am playing Lucian, who is a backline burst dive champion, and that's very important. In basically every clip that we're going to talk about in terms of line of scrimmage, it's very important to understand your champion's archetype, which again, that's what the course in the description is all about. So, as you can see, very unfortunate things has happened in this replay. Most of my teammates are dead. Also, I'm 2-1. Both clips I'm going to show you today, I'm not fed or anything. It's just I don't like those kind of clips. I want you to see the power really came from my understanding of the line of scrimmage, not so much how strong I was in the game. Okay, now the first thing I'm doing here is baiting. That's not really a line of scrimmage concept, but just hiding so they don't know where I am, so they get baited to go on their tower. Now, if you think about the line of scrimmage here, obviously it's between both me and Darius, because there's no threat. In this scenario, it's the best kind of scenario because we actually know where everyone is on the map. So there's no hidden threat. Sometimes you have to assume the line of scrimmage is maybe a little bit different because you don't know where the enemy players are. Anyway, let's continue. So now I come out. Pretty important that I now know that the threat of a pull is gone, because the pull extends Blitzcrank's threat by a ton, obviously. So that really impacts the line of scrimmage whenever Blitzcrank has his pull, and how that's going to really change the way I position. So now that this pull is gone, I'm going to go in and start fighting Mr. Darius here, who is full HP at the start of this. This normal kiting onto Darius currently. Now my E is about to come up back up, and I think this is the first real obvious point where you can see that I'm thinking about the line of scrimmage. So in this scenario, let me just draw. The line of scrimmage is here, but also here, right? Because we can assume that Ezreal could E in or Q in, right? Now he's not super threatening given his health, but together they might be able to do something. So it's something I should have in my mind. Now I think most players in this situation would probably E right at Darius, right? Because this is pretty much a guaranteed kill. You can just E at Darius, kill him. You might take a little bit of health, but you would definitely get the kill. Now, that's not normally the way you should be thinking. In most scenarios, if there's any threat at all, you should be playing to the line of scrimmage. So as you're going to see, instead of Eing directly at Darius, I E'd as diagonally as I possibly could, and also watch where I click. After I click on him, you see, look at my mouse here. I'm already trying to get away from Darius and extend that line of scrimmage. This also pulls me away from the other threat. So while I could have killed him, for sure, just by Eing right at him, I would have taken damage, and potentially like Ezreal could have eaten over the wall and did some additional damage to me. It was just way more risky to do that play instead of just playing well, just play well and continue to position based on the line of scrimmage. Now, the reason why I really like this clip is because I think the first part shows like you don't ever really E in that direction or walk backwards in that direction if you don't really understand the line of scrimmage. But I think the next part of this clip is also really important because maybe if I had taken more health or maybe if I had been too close for Ezreal to maybe do some damage to me, I wouldn't be capable of making the play that I make here, which is to aggressively flash over this wall against a pretty much zero threat Blitzcrank, because I'm assuming he's going to die, which he does. And here's the line of scrimmage is based on threat. If you don't perceive a threat, then you can kind of throw the line of scrimmage out the window. If there's no threat, you should pretty much just position to kill your opponent, right? So I just heal, I just run through the wave, and I just get as close as possible to Ezreal to increase the possibility for me to kill Ezreal. So remember, like whenever there's actually no threat, then that's like the best time to really go in and go ham, So I'm gonna just play out the clip in one motion so you can kind of see it in real time. Now, while that first clip was it's pretty straightforward in terms of the line of scrimmage, I wanted to show you more of a team fight where the line of scrimmage could be much more complex and it can change and there can be multiple line of scrimmages. So in this replay, I am playing Anivia. I'm 2-4, definitely not fed. I even have 1,200, like 1,300 gold in my inventory, which means I'm probably actually weak for this scenario in terms of how strong I really could be. I'm probably more in line with the opponents given that they're down as a team. And so, again, I just don't want to show a clip where I'm like super fed. Alright, so let's start going over this. So the moment this guy shows up, obviously, here's my line of scrimmage is here. We can see that Tahm Kench is top, and there's only one player we can't account for. My opponent's line of scrimmage are different than mine, right? Like sometimes when you're all together, you have the same line of scrimmage. But for them, this was the line of scrimmage a moment ago, but the second Lee Sin comes over, it goes to here. And so they have to position down to the bottom right. As opposed to just going straight down. Although that's a slippery slope because if you're not faster than your opponent, then you start running into tangent line problems. But we're not going to get into that, not today. Anyway, so for me, this is my line of scrimmage. Oh, first I should actually identify. I'm playing Anivia, which is a backline, burst, pick champion. She's also a pill and wave flare champion, but that's not really relevant for this team fight. So, as I continue going, so my line of scrimmage is here, and then you can see, this is like one of the first frames of me being able to notice that Vel'Koz is here. This pretty much instantly creates two lines of scrimmages, where there's one here and one here. If this giant wall wasn't here, I'd say the line of scrimmage is more so just like diagonal, but that's why this is also fully a jungle fight, so I thought this was a good replay. I think the replay will show you like um, the more advanced applications of line of scrimmage. Now, I noticed there's a second line of scrimmage, and this is me using my archetype. So I'm a burst champion and a pick champion. Now I try to save them from this archetype of Lee Sin trying to go in, but Lee Sin can jump, and you're gonna see that instantly change the line of scrimmage again. Like instead of it being like for them like 1 and 2, now it becomes 1. So it technically becomes easier for this Caitlyn to position, and she's playing probably the easiest champion to position in the game because she has the longest range. Anyway, I'm going to use my archetype so I try to pick off Lee Sin to change the line of scrimmage in my favor, and now I'm going to try to burst out Vel'Koz. This Vel'Koz has gotten too close to his line of scrimmage based on my threat. Like, I think he's probably focusing too much on here and not so much of the threat that's in front of him. And so I use my archetype to burst him out real fast. Alright, so that kills over. So now I have to start addressing what's going on over here. And you're going to see I'm not actually going to run through this corridor because that would be a horrible line of scrimmage for me. I'm going to be directly behind alone 3 enemy players. And so I actually try to go around and maybe meet my opponents or my teammates to the south. So if you saw there, at the moment she dies, and Nami obviously can't really do much for the dead Caitlyn, she had to make a choice of what direction to run. And I think this is a great example of safety. So technically, running down or running up was basically the same, right? Because there's in terms of towers, there's no safety in sight. And her threat was basically all around her, so she can pretty much pick in any direction to run. However, because she knows I'm in this area, I become her point of safety. I maybe can save her out, right? And so her deciding to run in my direction was very, very good. And also, my line of scrimmage is about to become much more simple because now that the Vel'Koz is in here, it's basically just a straight line. If I can show you, it's basically just a straight line between both teams, right? So we're going to talk about a little bit about archetypes here. Again, I'm playing a pick burst champion. Pick champions, your pretty much job is to identify a great target to isolate or stun, right? And who do you think the best target is for me to stun in this scenario? I believe it's Jhin. That is the definitely easiest champion to burst out, but also a carry, which is an important champion to pick out. So again, if you don't understand the difference between those two things, I go over that in the course. So I pick the Jhin, and then I burst the Jhin. Now again, let's say I was playing a different champion that wasn't a burst champion, and I was just playing a champion who was a pick. So let's say I was playing Camille, or let's say Gragas. I could prioritize. I guess this would be more so appealing than pick, but I could prioritize ulting the Jhin in a direction either towards me to try to pick him or away from me to try to peel him. Or in Gragas' case, he's actually so good that he's a disengage champion, so he can actually disengage his whole fight by isolating both the Lee Sin and the Jhin. Anyway, in this scenario, I pick out Jhin, and then I burst Jhin. My line of scrimmage is very simple. You're going to see how quickly that can change. So all of a sudden, my line of scrimmage went from being... let's draw this. So my line of scrimmage went from being here to now, I don't really perceive Thresh as that much of a threat, right? So it definitely is more so in this area. And then we're going to play through this. Oops. And boom. Now all of a sudden, I technically have 3 different lines of a threat, right? If anything, I consider him here and here. So now I'm actually kind of boxed in. A kind of situation that you saw Nami was in. But she was in a more normal situation to get boxed in, where like the enemy team were just kind of running at her, and she got kind of caught from their pursuit. But in this situation, the line of scrimmage changed and created multiple lines of scrimmage because of a movement ability from Lee Sin, followed by a movement ability from Tahm Kench. So this is why team fights and skirmishes can be much more complex, because this kind of stuff can happen where all of a sudden I went from having one very simple line of scrimmage to 3 different separate ones. Now, if you can see where all 3 of these lines are, I kind of had 2 ways of running away. I could either run in this direction, Or because this isn't that big of a threat, I could try to run in this direction. Now, before I press play, you can think about yourself. What should I pick, and what would you pick, right? Give you like 1 second here. So I decided to go up left because while Thresh isn't that big of a threat, he's still somewhat of a threat. Also, very importantly, again, if you think about safety, there's pretty much no safety running down, or at least nothing like concrete. There's no teammate, there's no tower anywhere near. Whereas Yasuo is in the area, so just like my Nami ran to me, I now will run towards my Yasuo. So you see, it actually took me a moment to be like, oh crap, Tahm Kench just ulted, and I was moving upwards for a moment, and then I had to realize that I had to go left. The reason I was moving up towards him is because even though he is a threat, it's kind of like the Lucian example, where I think I could kill him. So I wasn't that threatened by him specifically in this instance. I think I can actually just straight up kill him. So there's no reason for me to run away from him, just like in the Lucian example. But the moment Tahm Kench is coming, that's a different a ball game, right? So now I simplify my line of scrimmage and basically just make it another straight line. I'm not going to draw it. I'm going to press play here. And I try to isolate my opponents and disengage the fight, right? However, Tahm Kench has a different story, and he decides to just flash in. Unfortunately, I missed an ability. Unlucky. And this is another one of those points, just like in the Lucian video, where you saw that I stepped backwards even though I didn't necessarily have to. And you're going to see that again in this clip. While I'm in this team fight, I could just sit here. I don't necessarily have to move, right? I'm already behind. I'm just using my my ultimate, and I can just auto attack. But you can tell that I'm thinking about this concept while playing because of these micro steps. You see, I just took one step backwards. I auto attack, one step backwards. So you don't take those steps backwards, just like in the Lucian clip. You don't do that unless you have an understanding of this concept. And that's like if a coach is watching your gameplay, and I can see that you're making micro adjustments to accommodate for the line of scrimmage and your archetype. That's how we can see like how good of a player you really are in terms of like at least understanding the game. So again, pretty simple line of scrimmage. It's gonna change for a moment. So for a moment, I'm gonna realize I have kill threat on Thresh, and now I don't really care about my opponent's threat so much as me getting this kill. And so I'm gonna actually close the gap on to Thresh, just like you saw me do with Lucian on the Ezreal, and how I was going to do it to Lee Sin a moment ago. Now it's just cleaning it all up. So if you actually watch this clip in total, what really happened was I pentakilled the opponents over a longer duration of time, even though I started the fight as a 2-4 Anivia with not even that much CS for the time, and 1,300 gold in my inventory. That sounds pretty good, right? I didn't have to be fed. I didn't have to have my opponents like literally kill themselves in a very like bad manner. They didn't make like any drastic mistakes. I just played my archetype well. So I'm gonna play this out in a 100% speed and just let you see the fight in its entirety. So that's my first opponent. I pretty much 100-0 this player. I do like 80-70% of this Lucian's health or Jin's health. Basically, for the duration of this fight, that Tahm Kench and Lee Sin are going to be taking the rest of my damage through my ultimate. I do a decent chunk of Mr. Thresh's health, and I do a pretty good chunk of those players' health. So I did something along the lines of probably like 350 to like 400 something percent of my opponent's damage. If you look, I took almost 0 damage, and I wasn't fed or anything. It was just good positioning, some good play from my teammates, of course, and really it was a 4v5 also a pentakill. So I think this is a great example. That's why I always show this clip. I think this is a great example of like, although this situation was very complicated and it gave me a lot of opportunity to make mistakes, I played it well and I was able to accomplish a lot. So I just got done editing the video. If you got this far, I hope you liked the video, and subscribe if you want more content like this. I know this video was about a general concept of the line of scrimmage and kind of about archetypes, but in terms of archetypes, we kind of focused around examples using backline champions. If maybe you want me to come out with some shorter videos where I do examples of different archetypes,